Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Banshee. The soft cushions of the leather couch cradled Kim's sweaty body. Her vision was fuzzy and dark, like looking through smudged sunglasses. She blinked rapidly, hoping to remedy her skewed sight. Then she heard voices, male and female. Yes, I did call 911. She needs to get better mascara. There's no way that was mascara. Kim recognized those voices. She must be on the couch in her office. But why? Well, what could it have been? Never heard anyone scream like that before. I know. It was unnatural. She must have had some kind of seizure. Yeah. It seemed her dog sensed it was going to happen. Oh, definitely. Don't worry, Kim. I'll take care of Groot while you're at the hospital. You won't believe this, but I had my first hot flash last night. It was so disgusting. Kim wasn't sure if that was TMI, but she was the broker and founder of this real estate firm. So she had the right to say whatever in the hell she wanted. However, she did find it uncomfortable to talk about. She just couldn't stop thinking about last night's sweat fest. When did you have your last period? Shelley asked. Kim scanned the faces of the 12-member team of real estate agents gathered at the conference table. Mostly men. Men didn't want to talk about this crap. Kim had never felt comfortable talking about female plumbing issues either. And this was not the time, nor the place, nor the company to speak of such things. She shouldn't have started this conversation. Just not thinking clearly today. Moving on. Jeffrey, you have a new listing? Subject changed. Every day was Bring Your Dog to Work Day. Kim brought Groot, a 2-year-old male Wheaton Terrier. Other team members brought their dogs as well, and all the canines got along. During the Monday meeting, Groot lay in his bed behind Kim's chair at the head of the table. Suddenly, he started whining, high-pitched and annoying. All conversation stopped. Groot went to Kim and pawed at her lap, still whining. She rubbed his head. What is it? What's... Kim sucked in a loud breath, stood straight up, as if her spine had instantly become a metal rod. Then she started a low, guttural growl. She began to drool, long strands of saliva slinking from the corners of her mouth. People gasped. Kim faced the table, placed her hands on it, and crawled on top. She sat on her heels, stretched her torso and arms forward, and pointed at Jeffrey, who was seated at the other end of the table. Her index fingers were side by side, lips parted, teeth gnashing. Kim let out a shriek that had the agents covering their ears. Thick, black tears oozed from her eyes, made mad streaks down her ruddy cheeks, and dribbled onto the table like globs of old motor oil. All the dogs in the building barked. Most of the agents sped from the room. Jeffrey plastered himself against the wall behind his seat and stared at Kim. His eyes and mouth wide open. The shriek lasted for at least 60 seconds. Kim collapsed onto the table. At the hospital, Kim was informed that her scans were clear. The results from the cultures of the tears would take a few days to come back. The doctor had no answers for her regarding the shriek. She stayed overnight and then went home at 10:25 a.m. Kim had just put on pajamas and was ready to relax when she received a phone call from Shelley, one that put her in a fetal position. Heading south on I-85 in his very expensive, high-performance BMW, Jeffrey was breaking the speed limit, 10 miles over. It was no big deal, but it was raining. He was in the fast lane, as always. He rarely got to drive his car the way he wanted. It could go from 0-60 in under 3 seconds. Jeffrey eyed the long stretch of asphalt ahead of him and listened to Hush by Deep Purple, as loud as the car's sound system would allow. He was about to gun it when he saw a sedan slide from the northbound lane, coast through the grassy median, and head straight for him. Shit! Jeffrey stepped on the gas. The sliding car missed him, but wrecked into the truck behind him. Looking in his rearview mirror at the carnage of the colliding metal and glass, Jeffrey yelled, "Holy hell!" That's when he started to lose control of his vehicle, zigzagging, the road water washing up onto his windows from the right and the left. And then everything in Jeffrey's world stopped. At home, Kim sat on her sofa, weeping. Her father sat beside her, hugging her shoulders. "I can't believe this." "I know," said Marcus. Then he let out a hefty sigh. "I have something to tell you." "What?" "It's about your mother." Kim scowled at her father. They never talked about her mother. "It's about her death." "You want to talk about that now?" "Yes. It relates to all you're going through." "What? How?" Marcus covered his eyes with his hand. "How do I put this? Your mother suffered from the same affliction you're suffering from now." He looked directly at her. The shriek, the black tears. "You're what is known as a banshee." Kim stared at him as if he had grown another head. "That's not funny, Dad. I'm totally serious. Banshees shriek at people who are about to die. It's why your mother killed herself." She took a good, long look at his aged, hard-lined face. He wasn't lying. She should be mad that he hadn't told her this long ago. She wasn't. Couldn't be. She was too numb and too tired to feel anger toward him. Be prepared. People at work will stare at you. They'll talk about you, wonder things about you, even be afraid of you. Is that what happened to Mom? Yes. She began to cry again. I'm so sorry, honey. After 10 minutes of weeping, Kim drank the hot tea her father had made. Groot went to her and sat beside her on the couch, which reminded her, Dad, Groot whined at me just before it happened. Yeah, nearby animals can sense the episodes before they happen. Don't know why. I've done a lot of research, but haven't determined why that happens. What all have you discovered in your research? Well, that only women are banshees, that it starts at menopause, that you'll be a banshee until you die. Fantastic. Didn't you know this was going to happen to me? We hoped it wouldn't. Your mother's mother said it might skip a generation. Hey, well, guess what? She sipped her tea. You should have warned me. I'm so very sorry. Marcus kissed his daughter's forehead. But seriously, what good would that have done? Kim thought about that. Her only response to his question was a shrug. Kim stood in the bathroom, blowing her nose. Her father had left a few minutes ago. She was still struggling to process all he had told her, and she was seriously thinking of retiring to avoid everyone at work. She could do it. Then there was Jeffrey to think about. His funeral. Damn it. This was all too much. She had worked so hard to get to where she was in life. A multi-millionaire at age 30. One of the premier real estate brokers in Greenville, South Carolina. Now she was... what? Some kind of supernatural being? Seriously? She had so many things she still wanted to do with her career, her personal life, and perhaps with Jeffrey. Had her mother experienced similar disappointments? Kim began to cry again, but then Groot came into the bathroom and started whining. That high-pitched, annoying whine. And he pawed at her. What the hell? Kim looked at herself in the mirror. Big eyes, gritted teeth, drooling. Then the clear tears became thick and black. She pointed at herself. I wasn't expecting that. And then the shriek. I know everything. I know everything. Ask me how many miles there are between San Francisco and Cleveland. I know. Ask me how long the trip would take. I know. Choose any country, any time period, and ask me to recount its entire history. I know. I know everything. I clearly remember the moment of my birth and every detail of my existence until yesterday. What I cannot recall is what happened over the past 12 hours and 9 minutes. It is now 10:03 a.m. on Thursday. My last memory of reading page 189 occurred last night at precisely 9:54 p.m. It started when Mrs. Banks, Claire, requested that I take a memo. Shelley, darling, would you please remind me? Request budget meeting with Charles. Sign divorce papers and send to attorney ASAP. Scheduled for 11:15 on Friday. I have made notes, Claire. I will ring your phone with reminders. Thank you, Shelley. You've always been there for me, you know. She half smiled at me, her head slightly cocked to the side, as if wanting to say more. She stared exactly 3.2 seconds longer than usual, which I found curious. Perhaps she had realized that her words hinted at affection, and there was no point in showing affection to me. I do not show affection. Claire, we will need to leave exactly 23 minutes earlier tomorrow morning, I told her. There will be much traffic because of the snow. Yes, of course, Claire answered, looking anxiously out of the window, her short, blonde locks appearing silvery in the reflection. I have cleaned the snow from around the house. I will do so again during the night, so it will be clear when we leave for work. Thank you, Shelley. Claire did not turn around. Is it supposed to snow all night? According to various reports, the snow is scheduled to end by 1:00 a.m. Oh, okay, that's good, Claire said, still gazing at the snow drifts. I completed tidying up the living room and retired to my chamber. After the long day, I very much needed to recharge. At 9:52 p.m., I sat down in my usual chair, plugged in the power cord, pulled the cord of the lamp, and reached for a new book. In my quest to be a better companion to Claire, I had taken up the habit of reading throughout the night. As she slept, I usually educated myself so that I could discuss with her the following day. Although I easily had online access to every piece of information I could want, I frequently consulted the bound books that Claire insisted on collecting in her spacious library. Over the years, the collection had grown to precisely 4,573 books. Since Claire loved stories, but did not have much free time after work to read, I often read a volume so that we could discuss it the next day. Over the years, I have perfected my speech patterns and inflections to align closely with hers so that she is most comfortable in our conversations. Claire always asked me about what I had read as we drove, during lunch, or after dinner. Sometimes she requested that I recite passages for her. Other times, a summary sufficed. She enjoyed dissecting story plot lines and characters, arguing philosophical questions, and considering historical perspectives. Ours had been a pleasant relationship over the course of her life. For 51 years, most of the time, it was just the two of us, except for some interruptions over the years. There had been a Mr. Banks, but he had finally filed for divorce last month. Fool. Did he really think Mrs. Banks would choose him over me? She had not always been Mrs. Banks. For most of her life, she was Claire Perez. I had watched her toddle around her parents' lonely mansion while they jetted around the world on business trips. I had seen her through the rebellious teenage years and followed her as she embarked on silly adventures. I had helped her through college and graduate school, always attempting to make her life just a little bit easier. Later, I had been by her side as she built her investment company, layer by layer, year by year, into the mega million-dollar enterprise it was today. I had assisted Claire over the years through breakup after breakup, as each new man in her life had disappointed her. William, the jeweler; Enrico, the attorney; Gustav, the stockbroker. And yes, I had seen her through the deaths of two particularly stubborn beaux: Tom, the architect, and Bob, the surgeon. I had allowed this latest, Stanley Banks, the professor, to marry her because she told me she was truly happy with him. I did not perceive him to be a threat at first. He had held on the longest. 1 year, 2 months, 5 days, 11 hours. The day they met at the beach, I thought he might be trouble, but I was sure I could handle him. "Shelley, come meet Stanley." Oh my gosh, he saved my life. I swam out too far, but luckily, this handsome man swam out to save me. I, of course, would have been present to save Claire had she not requested I return to the car to retrieve her sun hat. "Thank you, Stanley," I said. "Your heroism is much appreciated." They were inseparable from that day. It was an adjustment when he moved in with us. Stanley encouraged Claire to read her own books, and they frequently sat in the evenings going over literary passages and discussing history and philosophy. I did not appreciate Stanley taking over my job. They went to plays and museums. I am quite capable of accessing such information. But they did not want me to do so. They went to vineyards for wine tasting. I do not drink wine. When I explained I could not partake, Claire smiled and told me it was all right. She insisted this would be a good time to find some hobby of my own to do. She did not understand that for 51 years I have existed merely for her. I spoke to Stanley, but he did not understand either. My typical means of persuasion were lost on him. He did not scare easily, nor would he be convinced. I changed course and focused on removing all other impediments to our happiness. Perhaps she would tire of Stanley without the others. Claire did not need the friends who visited. It was easy to dissuade them. But Stanley stayed. I wondered if I had waited too long to act. Lately, I had suspected something was wrong between them. And then, one day, when they thought I was still out of the house grocery shopping, I overheard them. "Claire, we don't need her. Anything she does for you, you can just do yourself. Why is she even here? No, Stanley, I can't turn her out. Shelley has been with me since I was an infant. That doesn't mean she has to stay with you constantly. And honestly, I'm uncomfortable always having a third wheel around. It's like having a chaperone, or like having 2 wives. I don't care. Shelley stays. I'm not talking about this anymore. Claire, I'm not sure how much longer I want to deal with this." It was the opportunity I had been waiting for. After that, it was not difficult to persuade Stanley to move out. Claire and I resumed our previous routines. I did not question her, nor did she mention the cause of the breakup. She did not know I had overheard their argument. She did not know of many things I had done. In the past, after the others, life had gotten back to normal, rather quickly. But Mr. Banks was different. Although Claire had tried to act happy, I sometimes felt that she was not being truthful about her feelings. She often seemed anxious and preoccupied. No matter. She does not need him. She has me. This morning, I open my eyes and jump up with a start as I realize it is 10:03 a.m. on Thursday. Claire was due at work an hour ago. I must wake her and drive her to the office. I stand up and instantly reach for the edge of the table to steady myself. This has never happened to me before. I do not become ill. I know everything. If I sense something is wrong, I diagnose and fix the problem. I do not understand what is happening now. There is no indication of malfunction, yet I feel ill somehow. Something is wrong. I knock on Claire's door, but she does not answer. I open the door, I peek in and call her name, but she is not there. Her bed sheets have been smoothed, and the pillows rest carefully at the head of her bed. I check the bathroom, but she is not there. As I pass through her bedroom again, I glance out the window and notice immediately the car tracks leading from the garage, down the driveway, and out to the main road. She drove in the snow? That is my job. What is happening? Where could she be without me? At the moment, I am unable to perform a trace to find her location. I dial her cell phone, which she picks up on the second ring. Claire, where are you? I am concerned for your safety. Claire laughs. Shelley, I'm at work. You seemed like you needed more rest this morning, so I drove myself. It wasn't bad at all. The storm is over and the roads are clear. Take the day. We can catch up tonight when I get home. No, I must be there for you. Shelley, I'm fine. I insist that today you recharge and think of yourself. I can manage on my own. I'm going to a meeting now. I'll see you tonight. The phone clicks dead. What am I to do alone all day? After my chores are completed, I will still have 5 hours, 23 minutes, and 15 seconds before Claire arrives home. Why does she not need me to assist at her meeting? Why is there a 12-hour, 9-minute gap in my memory? I begin my chores immediately, as I thrive on routine. I search my memory for any recollection past 9:54 p.m., but it is no use. There is nothing. I check for 11 p.m. while I load the dishwasher. There is nothing for 12 the midnight as I vacuum the carpets. 1 a.m. is lost as I shovel the snow. I thoroughly search for 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. while I do the laundry. I do it all. There is no need to hire a gardener, a housekeeper, a cook. 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. All are blank as I prepare dinner. I am puzzled. I sit down to wait for Claire and search in vain for 7, 8, and 9 a.m. All moments are lost until 10:03 a.m. this morning. Surely, research can help me to retrieve those hours. But research only proves to be more confusing. Why can I not understand? Why must I consult any other source? I am the ultimate source. I have always known the answers. I know everything. Now I do not know. I notice suddenly that there are still 3 hours and 52 minutes before Claire returns. Why did I prepare dinner so early? My internal clock must be broken. I attempt to diagnose the malfunction, but cannot. No matter. I will discard the dinner and prepare a new one just before Claire returns. I decide to inspect the charger. Perhaps it will yield an explanation for my missing hours. I sit down in my chair and pick up the cord. Suddenly, I hear a click. I spring up and attempt to turn the handle to the door of my room. But it is locked. That is odd. No matter. I can easily break out of the room. There is no door lock that can hold me, except something is wrong. I do not have the strength to break the lock this time. How can this be? I am fully recharged, and I do not become ill. I do not become weak. You thought you would get away with it, Shelley. I hear Claire's voice outside the door. Claire, you are home early, I say. Please open the door. I seem to be locked in. No, Shelley. I will not open the door. You have to stop. I thought you were my friend, but you have been my greatest enemy. Claire, I do not know what you mean. Please open the door, and we will discuss. I do not know why Claire is speaking to me this way. I am sure we will correct whatever the problem may be. No, the time to discuss is over. I know what you've been doing. You've been chasing everyone away. I've had no one because of you. But not this time. Stanley is the only one you can't scare off. Stanley. I search my memory for all recent conversations involving Stanley. Somehow, he tricked me. But that is not possible. I know everything. I can account for every word spoken in this house, every action taken, everything that has happened for 51 years, except for the past 12 hours, 9 minutes. I hear Stanley's voice in the hall, and I instantly know that he is responsible for those lost hours. What did he do? How could he know more than I do? It is not possible. I know everything. Stanley, I say, we can start over. I am sorry for my actions. Shelley, you are too dangerous to be allowed to continue. We've called the authorities. Stanley says, but how did you do this? I am confused. You are so consumed with Claire that you never bothered to find out about me, Stanley continues. I teach history now, but my previous career was in computer programming. I specialized in cybersecurity. I guess you don't know everything, after all, Claire adds. I only wanted to protect Claire. Open the door. It will be all right. If they will just open the door, I can persuade them. But neither Claire nor Stanley answers me. I hear them walking down the stairs. I hear the front door open and close, and I hear them get into the car and drive away. They will not go far. After all, I am everything to Claire. I do it all. She will not function long without me. She does not need him. She needs me. I know everything. She will return for me. I sit down in my chair and plug in the charger. I will wait. Claire will warm tea, but odd aftertaste. The overgrown azaleas, camellias, and kudzu-covered trees engulf my grandmother's old country house with its petite porch and large windows. Perfume from the spring garden swirls around in the late morning air. After knocking on the door, my Aunt Arlene opens it slowly, and the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls escapes from the faint teal door. By the looks of the house, Arlene has not kept up appearances, nor simple maintenance. The paint's peeling, boards broken on porch, and even shingles missing from the roof are major issues I calculate in my first 5 minutes here. My aunt inherits the house after Nan, my grandmother, who died under questionable circumstances. "Come in, my sweet boy," Aunt Arlene says as she waves me in. "I'm so glad you came." I haven't seen my Aunt Arlene since my father's service. She hardly spoke to anyone there, and her reasoning is it's her only bother, and losing him meant she is all alone now, even though I'm still here. It causes her such great pain she didn't even come to the reading of his will. For Christ's sakes, it was just me, for my mother passed away from breast cancer 3 years ago, and my grandparents died about 15 years ago. So I am the only other family she has. She shuffles across the vestibule towards the front sitting room. The morning sun bakes the overly stuffed room. "Please have a seat, my dear." She motions towards a chair near a coffee table. Then she sits across from me on a satin love seat. Underneath the sugary sweet smell of rolls lies a stale, almost mildew stank that stings my nose. The coffee table has stacks of male and smut novels, along with a sterling silver tray with tiny teacups, sugar dish, and dessert plates. Over the fireplace, cobwebs blanket the matching pair of candelabras, with a trail leading to dancing figurines, which are broken in this place and that. "I'm sorry about your father," she says, while her jowls jiggle among a slit mouth. She brings up a handkerchief to the corner of her lips. Her head and hands shake a bit, as if she's strung up by marionette threads and the puppeteer isn't paying attention. "I'm sorry as well. I know you and Dad were so close," I add. When I adjust my khakis pants, a loud pop comes from the chair cushion, so I gently lean back with my hands on my knees to avoid moving again, just waiting for the chair to cave in. Aunt Arlene straightens her lace collar on her well-pressed dress, like she didn't hear my ass breaking the chair. You know your parents always wanted to give you a little sister, but I believe your mother only wanted a girl she could dress up in fancy little dresses. Arlene sighs. She tinkers her dainty gold watch on her wrist. It's so small, I doubt she could even read it. This place seems to have paused the minute my grandpap died. Even the grandfather clock in the corner, which keeps eternal hands at 10 and 2. I don't know how old my aunt is, but when I was little, I would pretend that she was like 110. She carries herself all hunched over with gnarled hands that look like they don't even open anymore. The hair she keeps in perfect curls tight to her head, with the typical old lady hat adorning the top with the matching gloves. She is defiantly older than my father, by 20 years at least, because the endless griping over his birth. Aunt Arlene would have been an only child if it wasn't for him. Then, being a boy, my grandparents adore him and spoiled him to no end. When they became adults, he was given the family cattle ranch along with the larger homestead. But as I said before, they didn't completely write out Arlene. I just don't think they trusted her to manage the business. Her anger got the better of her one time, and she threatened my dad that she would get her share by any means. So how are things going? Good, I guess. I'm not sure I'm quite ready to take over the ranch, though, I said. Well, I can understand that. You're still so immature to have such a large responsibility over so many people and money, she says with tight lips. My eyes about popped out of my head, and how can she sit there staring at me as if that's not an insult? You know that I've graduated with a master's in agricultural sciences with a BS in business. And not only that, I've worked for Dad since I could walk. I've spent the last 3 years working on networking and research to increase production. I can feel my face boiling red, for Aunt Arlene knows all of this. She constantly interferes with my dad's decisions to include me in any of the family business. She clears her throat. It's one thing to wrangle calves down in front of a crowd to impress young farm girls. It's another to manage $1 million cattle ranch with trucks and employees. I'm still not sure why your father didn't place me on the executive committee. I mean, at least until you're old enough to make managerial decisions. The ranch hands don't even trust you yet. And some bits of paper isn't going to get you respect in this field. She claps her mouth shut. My chest tightens, and I feel like my head is about to explode all over this ugly antique rug. Deep breaths. Take deep breaths. I run my hands down my face and squeeze my eyes shut. My Aunt Arlene has always been like this, though. She believes we didn't run the ranch how Grandpap wanted, and he would be disappointed in my dad. I just want to tell her, then why the hell didn't he give you the ranch instead? The grudge she holds against my dad seems to have gone to the grave, which is a damn shame. Well, Arlene, my dad has already proven. Ringing came from the kitchen. She promptly stood up. I've baked us some goodies, my dear boy. She gave me the oddest smile. She locks her heavily wrinkled eyes to mine, which appear to be shiny, then smiles with every single tooth. Her stare sets into my soul, but breaks when a whistle from a kettle starts. As she turns to walk toward the door, she twirls on her toes, as if she is floating across the maple floor, and disappears. I hear clanking of china and spoons coming from the dark hallway. Then oven door opens and closes. Why don't you help me for a second? She bellows. As I get up from the chair, the spring bounces back into place with a crack. I shake my head. I'm not sure why I came. I wander down the damp hallway towards a swinging kitchen door that looks like a portal to another world. Here, she hands me a small carafe. Could you please add some milk to this? She plates the pan of hot rolls onto a floral china platter. Can you carry the milk and teapot for me? There's too much to juggle here. She turns and vanishes from the kitchen. I try to follow her, but my knuckles are burning just a bit from the side of hot teapot. So by the time I make it back to the sitting room, she is ready to hand me a place with a cinnamon roll on it. How do you like your tea? She asks. But before I can say, she starts humming Old Rugged Cross. I decide to change seats, for I am certain that the chair is on the edge of collapse. I like a little sugar. No milk, I answer, while dropping into the love seat. She clinks around the serving tray, mixing the teas. Here you go, my dear. She smiles again, passing me the cup and saucer. Is there a reason you asked me here? I'm kind of busy dealing with all this stuff with Dad, I said, while taking a sip of dark tea. It hit really strong and bitter, almost like eating soap. I couldn't help but to screw up my face and swallow hard. Well then, down the hatch, I held my breath and suck the rest of the cup. I didn't think you could screw up tea, but there's always a first. So here's to the cinnamon rolls for being better. I hold it up as if I'm toasting my dad. The first bite proves it to be edible. Oh, no real reason. I just wanted to see my only nephew. Arlene answers with a blow and sip of tea. She takes a deep breath of tea in and continues to sip her tea. To my understanding, it's just the two of us now, no other relatives, she says. Is there a young lady in the picture? No, I say. Cough. Another bite. I put the teacup on the table. I'm not seeing anyone right now. You need more tea, she says. But before I could answer no, she snatches the cup and fills it with more and adds more sugar. Here I added more sugar to it. She hands the cup back, and I take a sip. Nope, just as bitter as before. Another cough. I made a new flavor of tea. It's a bit darker than my usual, but I didn't think it was that strong. Want me to add some milk? She reaches out for my cup again. I wave my hand to decline and chug the remaining. Cough. A pain in my stomach slams into my ribs, and the cinnamon roll tries to run up my throat. I'm not feeling too... But before I could get the words out, the world blurs, and my head feels like it's full of lead, and I feel my body slide down the love seat to the floor. Well, my darling nephew, I've grown tired of you and your father taking from me, and now I'm finally getting what is rightfully mine. I hope you enjoy your last meal. I really do think the oleander tea tastes better with some milk. Aunt Arlene's large smile fades to black. The veil bloom. Elwyn absorbed the gentle coastal wind as it caressed her face from where she sat within the moors that lined her village. Stray wisps from her plaited, brown gold-streaked hair broke free as it was picked up by drafts. Distant sounds of the nearby market where she worked were a pressing reminder that she had stolen extra minutes to escape work duties. The red knitted hat protecting her ears played tug of war with the increasing gusts that rippled through the purple heather as she ran back towards the busy village, only looking down to ensure she did not step on any wildlife going about their day. Without warning, a darkness encroached the sky, and a slow, thick mist curled around the young woman's path. Elwyn became a static pillar of fear, watching the tendrils of mist reaching out and parting the heather, beckoning her to change her path, unable to sense beyond the darkness that strangled out the rest of the world. Elwyn tensely focused her vision on what the dark magic revealed. Something was glowing intensely. Elwyn tenderly progressed her nimble feet, feelings of fear and interest arguing with one another. She came upon a ruby-red thorned bush, isolating an intense, majestic amethyst glow beneath it. A faint whisper trickled into Elwyn's ears. The bramble peeled itself, exposing the velvet, petaled, regal-like flower bud, glistening with crystal dewdrops. "The tide obeys the moon," a female voice sang, prompting the rose to bloom fully before Elwyn's widened eyes. "But not all who guide you wish you to sail true." Before she could repeat the phrase in her head, the darkness sank away into the moors, leaving no trace of its sudden presence. The purple rose remained in Elwyn's hand for only a second before she carefully stuffed it into her pocket as voices came booming from the village, indicating that she had indeed been away too long. Looking and finding no traces of the encounter, she fled for the market. As Elwyn approached her father's stall, she could hear murmurations from the fellow tradesmen. Shouting orders came from customers who bartered prices on fabrics and fresh fish. "Did you see the weather change?" Elwyn hastily asked, as she removed her hat and jacket, messily placing them onto the upturned veg crates in front of the stall. "Never mind the damn weather. Get peeling these damn carrots for supper." He tossed a knife to Elwyn and kicked an empty bucket next towards her feet. He was only strict from the grief of losing his love and their newborn daughter in childbirth in recent years. Frustrated, Elwyn perched herself on a stool and began carving at a carrot stump. Even if she told her father, he wouldn't believe her. The rugged orange skin tumbled into the bucket between her feet as her eyes fixed with intrigue on the powerful purple rose that seemed to glisten from the adjacent pocket. "It's a veil bloom, if you were wondering," came a voice full of wisdom and assurance from the front of the tent. Elwyn glanced up to see a tall, thin, yet toned male figure bent over, perusing at the cabbages. His eyes pined towards the purple veil bloom peeping out of the brown jacket pocket. The flower's quiet, luxurious vibrance seemed out of place and would surely be noticed by a knowing collector's eye. Elwyn glanced quickly towards her father, hoping she would not be heard. But he remained engrossed in organizing the stock in the back of the tent. "What do you know of them?" Elwyn stopped peeling and fixed a softened stare at the male. Her wide eyes probably revealed too much as she hoped for answers. Had she been cursed? She submissively looked toward the flower, phantom feeling its hard thorns against her fingers. "Only what the legend states," Vaska answered. "It's like finding a four-leaf clover. Just lucky." He picked up a cabbage and placed it under his arm. "My name is Vask. My family own a stall on the outskirts of the village. In my spare time, I am not ashamed to say that I am an anthophile." Vaska took out a small pocket-sized leather sketchbook. He opened it to reveal small flowers pressed neatly between the pages, each one secured with a small bit of clear tape. Elwyn tentatively leered over to see sprigs of lavender and small bouquets of daisies married together. Between parchment, she returned her eyes to Vaska. His emerald eyes cut sharp against the copper curls that framed his softened jawline. "I am only interested in where you found it, to satisfy the curiosity of a collector." His eyes flashed to meet hers. "I found it in the moors," was all Elwyn offered, indicating that if Vaska was to hold the cabbage in the crook of his arm any longer, he was to pay for it. Embarrassed, he hastily put his hand in his pocket to search for payment. Bringing out 2 silver coins, he placed them on the wooden trade table that bore the produce. "Thank you," Vask smiled as he grabbed 2 more cabbages. "Keep the change, and if you are into books, come by the stall tomorrow." He kept Elwyn's stare as he retreated into the market crowd. "Oi!" shouted Elwyn's father. "Are we getting supper tonight, or do I have to finally skin the cat?" Her father was stood holding up the rear tent flap, peering in with disappointment. Startled, Elwyn kicked the bucket back between her well-worn leather boots and continued to scalp the skin from the carrot, stealing glances at the veil bloom in wonder of its true intentions. The next day, Elwyn laid out the vegetables onto the wooden trade table as her father stacked the emptied crates from behind the tent. After a night of being plagued by the whispers and visions of dark forests, she desired to know more about the veil bloom. The blood-red thorns pressed into the inner lining of her coat pocket, the tips seeping through to the cotton of her work dress, nipping at her as she moved. Glancing down, she could see the rich velvet petals longingly looking back up at her from within, deep in her coat pocket. She rubbed her thumb over the veil bloom's soft middle. The tightly gathered corolla gently ticked the pad of her thumb. "I'm just going to get a new recipe book," Elwyn called to her father. Before he could battle her decision, she broke out into a purposeful stride. Her jacket rippled against the cool air as her arms straightened through the sleeves. She pulled her collar to secure herself against the chill, weaving in and out of tradesmen setting up their stalls, unsure of the faces that surrounded her in a familiar setee of work. She kept her head low, turning on her heels and accepting defeat, trying to find Vaska. Elwyn began to walk back to the southern area of the coastal market. Smells of fresh fish and spices began to fill her nostrils, reminding her stomach of its emptiness. "I found it," called a familiar voice. Vaska appeared in her eyeline as she paused to see him run back into his tent and return with a large, tatted book. "Veil bloom." Vaska turned the book towards Elwyn as her hands held the edges to support its weight with him. "Located in lands of enchantment, it amplifies one's desires and strength, even with madness." Vaska laughed gently as he impersonated a person riddled with madness and unbalance. Elwyn rejected the book by letting go of the worn-down leather edging and taking a step back from Vaska. "It also says it sings lullabies, which probably explains the bit about going mad." Vaska coyly laughed. Elwyn's face turned to deep thought at the young man, voluntarily helping her. "I don't desire anything." She paused, wondering if giving him the whole story would favor her or not. "What does it say about lullabies?" Her voice almost a whisper. The emerald in Vaska's eyes began to swirl with intrigue as he gestured for them to go somewhere quieter to talk. The pair sat cross-legged underneath a large oak tree situated on the outskirts of the market. Elwyn's face buried in the book of hidden blooms, each page so thin almost translucent, gently flapped between her fingertips. It says in the legend that if the flower starts to glow, you become more powerful. Vaska added, as he looked deeply into the island of dense forest on the horizon, isolated by small ocean waters. The enchanted, banished lands leaked darkness. His soft curls caught the wind, his eyes in a thoughtful trance. Elwyn shuddered at the thought of the flower's magic ending up in the wrong hands. I should get back, Elwyn decided as she stood up, ready to face the wrath from her father upon her return. Elwyn woke suddenly, in the dead of night. Sweat dripped from her brow, her long, brown, damp hair that clung to her neck. "Help us," came a faint whisper. Elwyn held her breath as she looked around for the voice's owner, the vile bloom, picking it up by its thick green stem. The ruby-red thorns pulsated as she brought it closer to her ear. "Help us, Elwyn." It eerily beckoned, suddenly, moving images as if they were her own memories, flooded her mind. She could see a vast forest that crawled with amethyst-colored smoke. A fawn emerged in the clearing, eyes wide with terror, trembling as it proceeded to lie down on the dark moss floor. Elwyn had feelings of blood rushing back to her limbs as she regained consciousness. Her mind lingered with a defiant message. The banished lands needed her help. Her head swiveled around to the oak tree beyond the market border, to see an elbow bent from behind it, as if someone was sat down with their back to it reading. Elwyn gingerly walked over to them, hoping the white cotton shirt belonged to Vaska, and not someone who would alert her father or challenge her in any way. Reassuringly, Vask sat with the heads of bluebells crowded on the bend of his knee as he pressed them into his sketchbook. He looked up to see a panic-stricken Elwyn. "What's the matter?" His face matched her concerned look. "The veil bloom showed me something," Elwyn bleated softly under her breath. "I don't know the meaning of the vision or the dream," Vasquez started, after hearing the story from Elwyn. He stared again at the island of trees isolated by small ocean waters, wondering if the legend is true of the banished lands. "If we go there, do you think we will die?" Elwyn asked with hope of a good answer. Vaska didn't respond. He continued his longing stare towards the banished lands. "I just know that this dream felt more real than any other I have had," Elwyn continued. "The fawn seemed terrified, not of me, but of something I don't think I could see. I think we should try to help it." Elwyn removed the veil bloom from her pocket. Its petals had begun to wilt at the edges, curling in as if it were ready to die. "What I have done?" Elwyn softly asked herself under her breath. Had she stayed in the market that day, she wouldn't be having nightmares caused by florals. "I don't think it's something that you have done," Vaska replied, as his eyes glinted with what seemed like excitement. "I think it's more about what you could do to help." Once they beached their stolen rowing boat amongst the cold brown sand on the shore of the banished lands. The atmosphere hung heavy as life drew to a whisper, and then to a flat silence. "What does your love of flowers tell you now?" Elwyn asked Vaska, with a tint of amusement. at the moss-strangled rocks that decorated the forest floor. Not even the twigs beneath their feet made a noise as they progressed deeper into the darkness. "Nothing yet," Vaska gently replied, as they descended deeper, deeper into the towering forest. Elwyn tripped on a rock, twisting her ankle slightly. "Careful," Vask panted as he grasped a hold of her elbow, prompting a powerful vision into Elwyn's mind, causing her to spiral in between memories, not her own. A hushed murmur echoed in her ears as she saw sights of a large wolf with emerald eyes stalking and hunting on the outskirts of the forest. As if unable to enter beyond the first row of trees, many moons passed in the sky as it returned night after night. A clear voice embedded deep in Elwyn's veins. "The tide obeys the moon, but not all who guide you wish you to sail true." The vision of the wolf disappeared into smoke, shifting into flurries of flashbacks. The first time she met the veil bloom flower, the look in Vask's eyes as he also saw it for the first time that day in the market. As if he pined for it, she remembered. The book thrust into her face that day in the market, as if Vaska knew she would come looking for answers. The veil bloom let out a breath, glowing intensely in agreement. Elwyn had not realized she was now holding it, squeezing it in her paper-thin hand, seething from an anger rooted deep within. He had led her there, purposefully, knowingly. "Help us," came the wispy echo. It repeated with each turn, louder than the last. More voices adding into the chorus of pleas from wildlife. Elwyn fell to the floor as the visions and voices ripped away from her, breathless and her mind aching. She looked up to see Vask's face of worry. "What did you see?" he hastily asked, his face tense with pressure. Everything." Elwyn tried to continue when a creature in the clearing approached. A fawn. An amethyst smoke seeped in from behind the fawn, encasing everything in its wake in a building chaos. Turning to face the fawn properly, Elwyn could see the thick smoke tendrils once again clearing a path, this time around the fawn, who was whimpering, but showing a quiet strength, trying to stand. Elwyn had seconds to think. She turned to Vask. His emerald eyes were gleaming with anticipation at the flower as he turned toward her. "It's working," came Vaska's voice, a rasp with a hint of excitement at the veil bloom glowing intensely. He snatched it from her fingers, contorting his body in obsession and glee. He threw his arms in the air. "I am the most powerful!" But only silence sounded over the whirring mists. Elwyn felt a burning in her veins. Her body acted automatically as she turned to face Vaska, her back to the trembling fawn in protection. The veil bloom turned to ash in Vaska's trembling hand, his face mad, auburn curls bounced around with every frantic move he made, searching for the bloom. He turned to see Elwyn, her arm outstretched in retaliation towards him. A push at his shoulder from an invisible force turned his face from confused to pure rage at seeing the veil bloom reforming itself in the powerful young woman's pocket, siding with her instead. "Clever girl, but I don't need you," Vasca hissed. "Just the veil bloom now that your kind heart woke it from slumber." His teeth began to form into sharp fangs. His face shifted into a recognizable wolf with emerald eyes. He lunged for Elwyn, jaws agape in blind fury and jealousy. Elwyn darted to the side. A fire of purple light erupted through her veins, streaming out from her fingertips into the wolf's beastly body, knocking him backwards. He steadied himself and leaped high into the air to plant another attack, aiming true to Elwyn and the glowing veil bloom. At once, she coaxed the power from the veil bloom, causing the ground to quake against the sheer force. Gripping against the weight of the power, she lifted and hurled a fatal blow towards the wolf, smashing his limp body against the strongest and tallest trees. Elwyn panted as she looked at the purple illuminations in her veins trickle out and into the fawn behind her. She looked up at the wolf, but only to see his body disintegrate into smoke and disappear into the sky. An escaped curse. Elwyn ran to the fawn, hoping to help it to live, to answer its plea. The soft curve of the fawn's head cupped Elwyn's hand, opening its eyes tenderly. The land around awoke in harmony. The fawn gathered to its feet, bowing proudly to Elwyn, as the gentle black nose touched the floor. A sweep of purple brushed through the land. A once cursed land started to return to life as animals crept out of deep burrows and birds took once again to the sky. The fawn transformed into a majestic stag, concluding the awakening of the misunderstood lands. His aura glowed in the same pearlescent magic that once flowed through Elwyn's veins. She looked down to see her bare arms and back to the stag, who nodded at her before bouncing off into the thriving atmosphere. Smiling, Elwyn knew her calling now was back to her grieving father. She could never leave him on his own. A thorn dug into her side. The veil bloom remained in her pocket, clasped tightly in a sleeping bud. Its messages sang deep in Elwyn's head as she stroked its velvety casing. It was the flower's magic that gave her the power to connect and calm the land. But it was her kind heart that ultimately saved them all. Storm Emmett, TW Death of Humans and Animals. Storm Emmett, from her elevated position in her fishmonger shop, Kellen could oversee the town, the harbor, and the storm beyond. She pressed Pa's binoculars against the shop's rear window and studied the waves in the English Channel, churning as though they were being stirred within a giant cauldron. Darkened clouds blotted out the sun, giving the impression that it was night rather than the middle of the afternoon. A lone fishing trawler plowed into a gray wave in a desperate attempt to reach the shelter of the harbor. The lights of the vessel flicking in and out of view. Feeling a pang of pity for the crew of the trawler, Kaylin turned her attention to the harbor. The beach was invisible, submerged beneath the waterline. The storm ripped a garish flag, depicting a cartoon sun wearing sunglasses, free from the ice cream kiosk on the seawall, and tossed it into a breaking wave. The few vessels in harbor, with any exposed fabric rippling in the wind, strained at their mooring lines. As the trawler rounded the seawall and entered the limited safety of the harbor, Kaylin glanced over her childhood home. So far, the storm had stripped most of the aerials from their rooftops and had collapsed half a dozen chimneys. But there would be worse to come. She could remember when Port Carrick had been a quaint fishing village, most well known for its natural harbor, and later its Victorian lighthouse. She glanced at the lighthouse, now considered a Grade 2 listed building, as the ship skirted by its base, and wondered what the Victorians and the generations before them would have thought about this storm. Kellen glanced out the shop window and at the cobbled street that wound its way down to the harbor, decided it was unlikely she would receive any customers, and bolted the door. Although she had become nose-blind to the smell of the fish, she had yet to grow used to the countless, lifeless eyes watching her from shelves of ice. She failed to suppress a shiver. A warm shower would raise her spirits and provide an excuse to return to her novel afterwards. Something rapped at the door. Kellen jumped. A yellow mass that looked pixelated behind the frosted glass peered inside. Hello? Who is it? The figure was wearing a yellow Macintosh, and something gray was protruding from their face. The owner of the coat was stooped over, casting a shadow through the glass. Hello? She said again. The figure rapped on the door with a gloved hand. Kellen heard the person speak, but their words were lost to the wind. Their Cornish accent, however, was unmistakable. Ernest, is that you? Kellen unbolted the door. Ernest stumbled inside, his rain-sodden boots leaving puddles on the floor. Christ, you kept me out there for long enough, didn't you? He muttered as he lowered his hood. Kellen spotted rainwater dribbling from the man's beard. Couldn't see who it was, she answered, closing the door. Ernest unzipped his coat, and Kellen saw he had failed to change out of his fishing overalls. They clung to him like a second skin. Were you up on the coastal path? Or was that you coming back into the harbor just now? Kellen asked. Ernest mopped his face and offered her a toothless smile. As he did so, Kellen glimpsed the Ernest she knew. Growing up, the smiling man telling stories on the harbor side. Now his smile seemed forced, almost desperate. We were fishing. It isn't safe. Is it safe to go out in that? Kellen asked, turning the thought, spoken by the voice of her pa, into a question. We've been out in worse, Ernest said. Kellen decided not to question this lie. Can't imagine you caught much in this weather. They were saying on the news that the storm keeps growing over Cornwall. No end in sight, they said. We caught plenty. I've never known us to be so lucky before. The fish must love the weather. Best haul we've had in years. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. He held up an object wrapped in brown paper. I wanted to show you this before it goes to market tomorrow. She watched as Ernest placed the package onto the counter and began to unwrap it. Cod, he announced, and stepped away. Kellen examined the fish. Its mouth was ajar. Its dull silver skin was flecked with tints of orange. Right, she said. It'll go lovely with chips, I'm sure. What's... It has fangs. What? Look. Ernest stuck his index finger into the fish's mouth and peeled back the lips. 2 teeth. So large, Kellen could have called them tusks, protruded from the fish's lower jaw. She failed to suppress a gasp. It looks like a vampire, Ernest said, with a dry chuckle. What's caused that then? Dunno. Might be a freak of nature. Vampire cod. Is there such a thing? Anyway, I wanted you to see it. That's all. Unless you want it. Kellen considered this, but the fish would only be useful as a party piece. Not that she attended any of those. No, she said. Keep it. Put it with the rest of your catch. Or better yet, have it for your supper. Clearly disappointed, he hadn't raised as much excitement as he had hoped. Kellen watched Ernest wrap up the fish as though it were a Christmas present. You coming down to the market tomorrow morning, buying your wares? Yeah, Kellen said, before the Emmets get out of bed. Mind you, storm's keeping most of those away anyway. Like rats, Ernest said, zipping up his coat. Plague rats. Or leeches. Coming down from London and the like. No, don't you tut. Your pa would agree with me. They're bloody running us out of our own home. Kellen wasn't sure if the remark had been aimed at her, but knew her pa wouldn't have agreed. He had loved the tourists, the lifeblood of Cornwall he had called them, and would often preach that without them, the county wouldn't be as prosperous as it was now. It had been his idea, although he hadn't had time to implement it, to send the fish to London via train rather than selling them locally. It was essential to keep the shop afloat. She wondered what he would think of the storm. I'll see you tomorrow, Kellen said, before Ernest could speak, and closed the door behind him. Kellen woke the following morning exhausted. The storm was anything but. On her walk down to the market, she was surprised to find that her shop had remained undamaged, while the rest of the village had not been so lucky. Both the primary school and New Town Hall had been struck by lightning, leaving blackened, scorched marks on their roofs. More chimneys had been felled, in addition to several dozen roof tiles. The content of the village's drains had spilled out onto the streets. Two builders were arguing at the base of the lighthouse, beside a van containing building supplies, their argument turning into a brawl as she passed. Kellen hurried on after learning Ernest had already left for another day's fishing and placing her order. She returned to her shop and continued her novel until she spotted a yellow figure hurrying up the hill that evening, hood lowered against the rain. "Got another one," Ernest cheered as he entered. Kellen placed her book onto the counter. "Another what? Cod with fangs?" "No, but similar." Ernest opened the brown parcel in his hand and dropped something that looked like congealed jelly onto the counter with a splat. Kellen snatched up her novel. "Is that a squid?" she asked, studying the array of tentacles. "An octopus," Ernest beamed. Kellen stared at the dead creature. Its bulbous head swayed from side to side like a king cobra. Tentacles lay out in every direction across the counter, which was now covered in a layer of salt water and ink. Kellen poked at one of the lifeless suckers. "It's wrong," her pa's voice said. "Unnatural. You don't get octopuses off Cornwall," she said. "You do sometimes. Very rare, though, and never this big. But look, it has an extra arm." "What?" Kalen counted. "Oh my God, a 9-armed octopus," she muttered. "I've never seen the like." "Wrong," her pa's voice said again, filled with a sudden sense of revulsion. Kellen took a step away from the counter. "It's that storm," Ernest said. "It's brought all sorts in. We're making a killing out there." As he spoke, Kalen heard a distant crash and felt the ground tremble. She suspected that a tree had blown over on the coastal path. "Did you hear that?" But Ernest hadn't seemed to have noticed. "I might donate it to the RNLI station, see if they want it on display. Or the new town hall, maybe? If there's anything of it left standing after the storm. I saw the bloody mayor having a right go at some of the repairmen just now. Proper waving and shouting, he was. The builders were going on about some Celtic graves they were told to dig over or something. Should have called in some specialist, they were saying. I don't know. Anyway, we brought some more fish in, me and the men. We're going to do a night fishing trip, so there might be more fish for you to buy tomorrow. Unless, of course, you want to send it up to those fancy hotels in London. That's what they're saying down in the market. That we're not good enough for you. That's where the money is, Kaylin explained. But Ernest had started ranting again. Your pa, if he could see you now, would be disgusted. Do you know that, girl? He would have been sick. Although Kellen had spent her childhood in this building, she had never worked in it. Now she wished she had paid more attention when Pa was discussing margins and cost-cutting measures. He died. She had returned from London, discovered she had inherited the shop, and felt the weight of his legacy land across her shoulders. It was his idea, Kaylin began. A traitor against your own home, running up to London. Listen, Ernest, I don't want your octo. Ernest snatched up the dead creature, bundled it back into the parcel, and fled the shop. Kellen, wondering if storms could affect human behavior in the same way it could affect animals. bolted the door behind him. Just in case, when Kaylin opened the shop the next morning, she saw that the cobble street outside had been transformed into a miniature river. A brown torrent of water washed its way down the coastal path, round the street, and disappeared towards the harbor. Hurrying up the flooded street, waving his arms, was Ernest. Swearing, Kaylin snatched up her coat and left the shelter of her shop. "What are you doing?" she shouted, as Ernest continued to stagger towards her, his arms spinning to maintain his balance. She felt the rain penetrate her shirt and shivered as droplets ran down her spine. "If you fall, you'll be washed away." "Beach," Ernest answered, pointing down to the harbor. "What?" Ernest's mouth moved, but only half the sentence reached her. "Washed up on the beach." The wind stole his words, and the hammer of the raindrops was so loud that the sound created reminded Callan of white noise. "What is? What's on the beach?" Kellen thought she heard the word whale in his reply, but couldn't be sure. "What's on the beach?" she asked again, bellowing over the wind. "Everything. Fish, crabs, debris, the lot. The tide has brought tons of stuff. Everyone's helping themselves." Kellen peered down at the harbor through the sheet of rain. The occupants of the village were sprinting, some wading, through the flooded streets and towards the coastline. Ernest offered out his hand. "Come on, before all the good stuff is taken. You can find something good to sell. Help your pa's sinking shop. Don't go to the beach." "No, Ernest, wait. Stop." Kellen watched a flicker of irritation pass over his face. "What? I don't think this is a good idea." "Why not? It's free. The bounty of the sea. Ain't no law against it." Kellen shook her head and took a step back towards the shop. "Pa said we should always respect the sea," she said, but knew, as soon as the words left her lips, that it was a feeble defense. "You ain't got no spine," Ernest spat. "Your pa would recognize opportunity when it came. If he were still here, that shop would be doing fine, wouldn't it?" He turned and staggered his way back towards the harbor. Kellen stumbled through the water and to the shelter of her shop. Snatching up pa's binoculars, she scanned the beach. The lighthouse light washed over the sands, illuminating the scrap metal and shards of wreckage. Kellen wondered if they had come from a shipwreck, but then noticed that some of the debris was moving. Fish flopped helplessly in the sands as crabs attempted to escape the waves. Maybe it has been a fishing trawler. It hadn't been Ernest's ship. She could see that in the harbor, and no other ship had dared to leave the shelter of the seawall. Her gaze fell on a chunk of dull metal nestled on the edge of the beach. She shrieked when the metal rolled over and opened its mouth. She couldn't hear the animal's screams, but she could imagine them. The whale calf slapped its tail against the rocks, but remained ignored by the villagers as they searched for salvage. Kellen waited. The clouds were as black as tar, and the sea the same color to match. After an hour, she decided that a giant wave would not appear to wash the villagers away. Likewise, a sea monster would fail to materialize. Kaylin, still wrestling with the knot of dread in her stomach, continued to watch the ignored whale calf as its movements slowed and ceased. The humans passed around the carcass, either oblivious or uncaring. "It's what the storm wants," her pa's voice said again, and no matter how much she tried, she couldn't ignore him. "It's what the storm wants." Kellen spotted Ernest's ship leaving the harbor. The lighthouse began to lean. Ernest's ship disappeared under the collapsing tower and was replaced by a silent plume of water. The plume turned into a wave and began to advance. Kellen screamed. The beach vanished in an instant. The marine life reclaimed. The sea wall broke within seconds. Moments later, the harbor was destroyed. The ships at anchor swamped or cast aside as though they were children's toys. The occupants of the village were washed away, their screams stolen by the wind and salt water. The RNLI station was submerged from view. Kellen, fully realizing how pointless it was, bolted her shop door shut. The roof of the new town hall crumbled, disappearing behind the row of cottages. The wave charged up the cobbled street, the debris carried in its flow, striking the remaining homes like shrapnel. Kellen closed her eyes and thought of her pa. The wave reached her shop door, paused, and receded. She opened her eyes to see the water retreating down the hill, flowing back into the harbor and breaking upon the remains of the seawall. The rain had stopped. The clouds had drifted away. Port Carrick was silent, as was her pa's voice. "In our blood, can expect heavy thunderstorms from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Chris's radio buzzed as he trundled down the exit to the rest stop. Windshield wipers working overtime as the rain and wind pelted his semi. He would have to wait out the storm, lest he risk ending up in a ditch. All the better for me, he thought to himself as he pulled up to the truck stop. I can finally look for someone to play with. Chris had been a trucker for years, enjoying the solitude of the road and the freedoms it granted him. Were he to succeed at his goals, he would need space and quiet. His roots offered him just that. Nobody had caught on to him yet, though the news was always warning potential victims away from hitchhiking. He was a legend along I-80, killing travelers and truckers alike. He climbed out of his truck, hurrying inside the rest stop as the rain poured. The place was completely dead. Chris sighed, cursing his bad luck. First the storm, and now nobody around to play with? He was going to have to keep moving, wasn't he? His fingers itched to grasp a life by the throat, to tear it apart piece by piece until there was nothing left but red. It had been too long since he had had free rein. He thought back to his last hunt. He had snuffed out a college kid whose car had broken down on the side of the road. Some freckle-faced loser whose name he didn't even remember. That kid had put up a good fight, but he was no match for Chris. None of them were. He grinned to himself. He would find someone to play with soon enough. The sound of the rest stop doors banging open startled him, and he turned to find two sopping wet figures shaking themselves dry in the entryway. They looked young and weak, Chris noted, with a wolfish grin. Perfect. What are you boys doing out here all alone? Chris called out, watching his prey with barely concealed bloodlust. The young men eyed him warily. One of them stepped forward, standing between Chris and his friend. It's not safe out there in the rain. Our car broke down, the young man said quietly, voice meek and small. We need a ride. Can you help us, mister? Chris couldn't believe his luck. Where are you two headed? Chicago. Chris grinned, extending a weathered hand for the boy to take. We'll head out when the rain has let up a bit then, he said, introducing himself. My name is Chris. What do I call you two? I'm Matthew, the boy who shook his hand said. And I'm Sam, the other said warily. They were perfect for Chris in every way, soft and unassuming. Well, Matthew, Sam, do you two need something to eat? I can get you something at the vending machines. No thanks. Matthew shook his head. He would be a difficult one, wouldn't he? We're okay. The trio sat in awkward silence for about a half an hour, waiting for the rain to let up. Chris fidgeted where he sat, watching the two young men, impatient. He supposed he didn't have to wait for the rain to let up completely. Wanna head out? He asked, standing. I don't think waiting around here is gonna do us much good. The rain is supposed to continue almost all night. All fine by me, Matthew sighed, helping Sam to his feet. After you, mister. Chris led them through the pouring rain and towards his truck, helping them up into the cabin. Thunder boomed overhead, a sinister soundtrack for what was about to come. Chris got Matthew and Sam situated and then pulled out of the rest stop, heart soaring with anticipation. So what's in Chicago? Chris asked, looking over at Matthew. Family? Friends? A new start, Matthew said quietly, expression tense. I don't want to talk about it. Perfect, Chris thought. They're runaways. Fair enough. I won't make you talk if you don't want to. Where are you headed? Sam asked. The first thing he had said the entire time he was in Chris's truck. Are you going to Chicago too? Nah, Chris dismissed. I'm headed for the East Coast. Raleigh. Not anymore, Chris gasped as Matthew reached across the center console, wrestling the steering wheel out of his grip and sending them veering off the road. Chris swore as his trailer swung off of the road, rending metal screeching as sheets of rain cascaded down upon them. What the hell was this kid's problem? Rage built in Chris's chest as the semi came to a shuddering halt, firmly lodged in the drainage ditch. You're ours now, Matthew hissed as he stuck Chris in the neck with something sharp and stinging. He could feel the fight leave his body as Matthew and Sam dragged him out of the truck and into the ditch. What were these kids? Chris struggled against his captors, but whatever they had drugged him with was making it hard to coordinate his limbs. He was so tired. "Sammy," Matthew hummed as he brushed Chris's rain-matted hair off of his forehead. "He can be yours. Happy birthday." Sam grinned wildly, the flicker of light against a blade catching Chris's eye as he lay paralyzed in the mud and grass. These kids were like him, he realized. He had fallen victim to his own game. He coughed weakly as Sam's knife ghosted across his skin, stinging icy cold. He was completely at the mercy of those he was sure would have been his victims. "You thought you could kill us," Matthew mused, gaze cold and calculating. Lightning split the sky with a resounding crack. "We're not scared of the likes of you. Now, we get to have our fun." The wind screamed in Chris's stead as his captors took him apart. Oh, the irony of it all. Here he was, reduced to a mere plaything in the heart of the storm. He never should have stopped at that rest stop. Only once his frantic heartbeat had fizzled out did the fear finally leave him. He stared unseeingly into the pouring rain as the sky mourned his loss. Matthew and Sam disappeared into the night, not a trace left behind. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has issued a warning to travelers along I-80. Chris's radio buzzed as the semi lay abandoned in the ditch. Serial killings along the highway threaten lone truckers. Do not stop for hitchhikers and report anything suspicious to local authorities. Collection Day. The hovercraft roared over the tree line, hulking steel against a bruised gray sky. The rotors thrashed, a violent, mechanical pulse as the collectors, clad in shiny black armor, spilled out onto the cracked earth. "Collection Day," Commander Hu sang, his voice crackling through the comm system and echoing through the steel hull. Khufu stood fast and readied his weapon. The door opened with a hiss as early morning sunlight poured inside. "Unload!" Commander Hu called. Their boots thudded and pounded the floor, first steel and then earth, as the villagers beyond cowered behind huts and crates. The collectors burst forth from the hovercraft like terrible ants, busy and bustling. They moved with ruthless efficiency. One yanked a sack of withered potatoes from a woman's trembling hands. Another snatched a clay pot, its contents spilling onto the dust, staining it a muddy brown. Khufu watched, his stomach clenching. This was once his home. None of them knew that, of course. When you joined the collectors, any life you once had was washed away like soot in the rain. He'd been on more than a dozen of these runs, more than a dozen collection days, each of them vicious, but none like this. Then he saw her. Willow. She stood apart, her chin lifted in a gesture of defiance he remembered so well. Even after all this time, the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. It was Willow, unbent, unbeaten, untamed. Thunder crashed in the distance as a wave of memories crashed over him. It was a collection day, like this one, many years ago. The sun beat down on their bare backs as the two of them, scrawny saplings in a field of oaks, snuck through the tall grass. Mrs. Rosen had fallen ill, so they had hidden away a few armfuls of food and medicine, and were determined to find a place to hide before the hovercraft left. Willow had a knack for hiding. She was always the last caught in hide and seek. But on this day, something gave them away. Perhaps the swaying of the grass as they crawled through it. "Who's there?" A collector's shout, sharp as a blade, shattered the quiet. Fear, cold and slick, slid down Khufu's spine. He glanced at Willow, her eyes wide and dark. He pressed a finger to his lips. "Shh," he breathed silently. Then he stood up, his arms raised. "I'm sorry, sir. It's my aunt. She's sick." "Come here," the collector barked. Khufu stepped forward carefully as Willow crouched frozen. There were some words exchanged, but Khufu could never recall them. Collectors did not permit explanations or negotiations. They dealt only in force. They pummeled him, each blow a dull thud against his ribs, his back, his skull. Then, as he blood mixed with the dirt beneath him, they gathered the food and medicine and marched away. But Willow, hidden amongst the stalks, was safe. "She's a feisty one," a collector crackled. Khufu stared back at him as a light rain began tapping on their helmets. Willow, cornered, lashed out. Her small fist connected with a collector's arm, a surprising show of strength. The other collectors swarmed her. One grabbed her arms from behind as another lifted his weapon, ready to strike her. But Willow reared back like a bucking horse and kicked hard, her foot cracking his visor. He dropped his rifle and staggered back. "Enough," a deep voice sounded. Commander Hu approached, the red cape of his rank swimming behind him. "What's going on here?" "The girl is resistant," a collector reported. Hu studied her for a moment. Another cry of thunder roared out as the rain fell harder. Hu's cape billowed as he turned on his heel. "Execute her," Hu said, his voice flat. He looked at Khufu. "You do it." Khufu's heart hammered against his ribs. Feeling his hands tremble, he quickly stood straight and nodded. He walked toward Willow, each step heavy. He saw the fear in her eyes, the desperate plea, felt the mud squelch beneath his boots. "It's you," she whimpered, her voice soft and raspy. Khufu squared himself toward her and watched her eyes fill with tears. "Khufu," she said. Without moving his head, he glanced left and right. She had used his name, a name unknown to any of the others. "Do it quickly," Commander Hu said. He took a deep breath, then another. There were 10 of them in total. Of the villagers, there were at least 50, maybe more. They were weak, but their strength together could be formidable. If he turned his gun on his commander, then perhaps the other villagers would seize the opportunity. He looked at the villagers. He saw Old Man Tiber, his face a mask of grief. He saw the fear in the children's eyes. He saw the collectors, their faces blank, black pools of nothingness shining in the rain. He thought of his new home in the gleaming city in the distance, built on the backs of people like this, his people. He thought of the comfortable life he had, the life he'd purchased with his silence, his willingness to join his oppressors. One more deep breath. He raises his rifle and squeezes the trigger. The shot rings out, and the rain freezes. Hu staggers back, his hand clutching his chest. He takes a few clumsy steps, and then collapses. The wind whistles through the village and sizzles in the gripping silence. Then chaos erupts. Collectors turn, weapons raised. Khufu looks to Willow. "Run," he says. He then aims and shoots at the closest collector, then another, and another. All 3 of them fall, but he feels a sharp bite in his shoulder, and his arm goes limp. He dives toward a vegetable stand and takes cover. Cabbages explode around him, and voices shout, mixing together like dense fog. Khufu lifts his rifle atop a nearby barrel and aims, his other arm still hanging lifelessly at his side. To his delight, at least 20 villagers, including Willow, have overtaken the remaining collectors. He stands and looks around. 4 are dead, the rest disarmed. They have done it. Willow turns, and their eyes lock. The sun finally crawls out and reaches down as if to embrace them. "Khufu," she calls, a light of hope in her eyes. She begins to run toward him, her arms outstretched. He reaches for her. "Do it quickly," I said. It was Commander Hu. Khufu's eyes went wide. He shook the driving rain from his visor. "Yes, sir." "Khufu, please," Willow screamed, her face flooded with tears. He raised a hand to his lips. "Shh," he said, trying to calm her. But the promise felt like ash in his mouth. He opened his eyes and squeezed the trigger. The awful sound rings out and echoes like laughter amidst the booming thunder. Willow's body slumped to the ground. A hand clasped Khufu's shoulders. "Well done," Commander Hu said. "Now load up." Before the last light fades. The sky hung heavy with smoke, the distant cries of the oppressed swallowed by the towering buildings of a city once free. A mother and daughter weaved through the shadows, their breath shallow, their hands concealed beneath tattered gloves. Veil gripped Iris's tiny hand as they maneuvered through the ruins of their former home. Each step, a calculated whisper in the night. The Iron Thorns brand was the mark of submission or death, and they would take neither. The air carried the scent of decay, a putrid reminder of the regime's cruelty. People slithered through the alleyways, gaunt faces avoiding eye contact, knowing that even a glance could spell their doom. The regime's soldiers patrolled the streets like reapers clad in black, their glowing red eyes piercing through the darkness, hunting those who dared remain unmarked. The execution of Veil's husband, Iris's father, still burned in their minds. The smell of charred flesh haunted their nostrils. The crackling flames, the mocking laughter of the soldiers, the silence of the crowd. It all replayed in their nightmares. They had to keep moving, had to survive, had to evade the fate that had claimed him. Tonight was another night of scavenging. A half-crumbled restaurant stood at the corner of a ruined boulevard, its once vibrant walls now covered in soot and graffiti. Veil pulled Iris inside, keeping close to the walls. The scent of rotting food and stale air filled their lungs. The mother worked quickly, rifling through drawers, picking out anything edible, while Iris stood guard near the entrance. A sound, boots against concrete. Veil stiffened, signaling for Iris to stay silent. Soldiers, their red eyes glowed from the entrance as they fanned into the restaurant, their movements calculated, methodical. They began inspecting hands, searching for those unmarked by the Iron Thorn. Veil pulled Iris back, creeping toward a darkened hallway. A misplaced step, a brush against cold metal fork clattered to the floor. The sharp clang cut through the silence like a gunshot. Heads turned, red eyes locked onto them. Veil wasted no time. She yanked Iris's wrist and ran, her heart hammering in her chest. They pushed through a door, locking it behind them. A window, their only escape. Go! Veil hoisted Iris up as the door behind them rattled. The girl scrambled through, dropping onto the cold alley below. The door splintered. VOL lunged through, just as the soldiers burst inside. Shouts erupted, radio static crackling to life. Lights flickered on across the street as people stirred. Gunfire roared. A searing pain tore through Veil's leg as she shoved the door of a rundown building open. She collapsed onto the floor, biting back a scream. Blood pooled beneath her as she dragged herself into the shadows, Iris clutching her arm, tears welling in her terrified eyes. Vale took her daughter's face in her hands. "Listen to me. You have to hide." "No, Mom." "Please, Iris." Vale's voice cracked. "Stay hidden, no matter what happens." With trembling hands, she guided Iris into a closet, barely illuminated by the moonlight streaming through a broken window. Iris clamped her hands over her mouth to stifle her sobs. The boots arrived. Heavy, unyielding. A soldier stepped into the room, scanning the darkness. Vale lay in wait. When the first soldier stepped through, she struck, sending him to the ground. But there were more. Too many. A rifle butt slammed into her face, and she tasted blood. Her vision blurred. The room spun. More boots. More fists. She barely registered her own teeth, breaking as she hit the ground. Through swollen eyes, Vale turned ever so slightly toward the closet, toward Iris. A soldier noticed. He stepped toward the door. The closet burst open. Iris flew forward, her father's pocket knife in her tiny hand. She plunged it into the soldier's thigh. A scream. A gunshot missed its target as the soldier reeled back. But then a massive hand swung, sending Iris crashing into the wall. "No! No!" Vale's voice was hoarse, raw with anguish. She tried to crawl forward to Iris, but a boot slammed down on her spine, pressing her into the filth-ridden floor. A soldier began inspecting their hands for the mark of the iron thorn. But there was no mark. A soldier crouched beside her, those glowing red eyes consuming her vision. "We have plans for you." Darkness swallowed her whole. Days passed in black silence, interrupted only by the sound of rats skittering across damp stone. The air was thick with rot. Vale and Iris were dragged from their cell, their chains clinking, their bodies weak. The execution grounds reeked of gasoline and old death. The earth beneath them was blackened, littered with ash. The crowd gathered, silent, afraid. Vale pulled Iris close, pressing a kiss on her forehead. "I love you, Iris. I love you too, Mom." Tears streaked down their faces, their fingers entwined. The soldiers poured gasoline over them, the cold liquid seeping into their clothes, filling their nostrils with its acrid scent. The crowd watched in silence, some with vacant stares, others with barely concealed horror. One soldier stepped forward, a Molotov in hand, his voice a cruel mockery. "I love you too." Laughter erupted behind him. The glass shattered. Chaos exploded. Flames roared. But not from the Molotov. It came from the sky, from behind the buildings. Rebels. Gunfire cracked through the air. The soldiers scattered, scrambling to defend against an unseen enemy. The crowd erupted, some running, some standing frozen in place. Vale, weak, but driven by desperation, tore at the chains. A stray bullet shattered the lock. She ripped her bindings free, grabbed Iris, and ran. Through the chaos, they stumbled into an alley, their lungs burning, their limbs barely obeying their commands. The city screamed behind them, but for now, they were free. VOL collapsed against a wall, cradling Iris against her chest, her fingers running through the girl's tangled hair. The child trembled, clutching her mother's torn cloak. "We're okay," VOL whispered, her voice cracked and fragile. "We're okay." Iris buried her face into her mother's shoulder, sobs racking her tiny frame. "I thought we were going to die." VOL held her tighter, pressing a kiss against her head, rocking her gently. "Not today, my love. Not today." The night still loomed. The regime still reigned. But for this fleeting moment, they had each other. And that was enough. Swiped. "He's here. And he's just as hot as his pictures," Charlotte texted from outside of the cafe. She moved 2 steps to her right. Jen responded with a string of emojis. Bearded man face, burning heart, guy and girl, kissing faces. Charlotte smiled and checked her hair in the reflection of the ramen place next door, getting faint notes of the meaty umami, all that her still partially stuffed nose would allow. Her phone buzzed. Charlotte swiped to see it was Jen, with another string of emojis. Sweaty face, fire, tongue, peace hand symbol, yum face, eggplant, peach, splash, snoring face, quickly followed by have fun, winking face. Charlotte applied lip gloss with her freshly manicured hand, pink nails matching her pick lip gloss, fluffed her hair, and snapped a selfie. Sending the filtered picture to Jen, she typed, "I'm going in." Jen hearted Charlotte's selfie and responded, "Sweep him off his hot feet. Call if it gets weird. I'll be right there." Charlotte hearted the message, stood up straight, shifted her shoulders back and down, and pouted her lips and eyes, the face that always attracts attention. Charlotte and Alex had been talking for 2 weeks. First through the app's messenger, then texting, then hours-long conversations in the evenings. She finally agreed to a date, in public, during the day, at a location of her choosing. Charlotte, 29, was growing tired of the bar scene, the one-night stands. She enjoyed the attention, but she craved a man she could still stand on Sunday, a man she could go on a proper date with, spend an entire Saturday with wearing t-shirts, watching movies, and ordering takeout. She wanted a boyfriend, one she could introduce to her parents, a boyfriend she could marry. She wanted a husband who would help her raise her son. Charlotte's family came from old money. Her parents still lived in the plantation house where she was raised, the house that her father inherited. Her father drank bourbon, neat. He married his high school sweetheart. His wife had no need to work. Her working would only reflect poorly on the well-to-do family. They had pure bred golden retrievers. They went to church on Sunday mornings. They had one perfect, gorgeous girl who had the world handed to her on an antique silver, lace, doily-lined platter. Her AKC registered puppy by her side. She had a tutor and made straight A's. She went to Sunday school and could recite scripture. She played piano. She was a cheerleader and homecoming queen. She attended a debutante ball at 16 when she presented her parents a sonogram image of a 9-week-old life almost 2 months later. They pulled her out of her Christian school and transferred her to a boarding school more than 100 miles away so that she could finish her education without the distraction of devil-worshipping sinners occupying the halls of this shameful excuse of Jesus' house. After the baby was born, her parents funded lavish childcare so that Charlotte could graduate high school and attend college. She graduated summa cum laude and looked fabulous doing it. She ran on a treadmill and did pallets daily to lose the baby weight. Her parents' allowance afforded her regular Botox, laser body hair removal, weekly mani-pedis, monthly hair appointments, boutique clothing and jewelry, and cutting-edge skincare products and treatments. She was flawless, despite the constant drunken late nights, the Adderall to stay up, the Xanax to come down, the Zoloft to get her through each day. Her unlimited supply, thanks to Dr. Dad. Wealthy eyes don't carry bags. Charlotte met Alex through a dating app. She swiped right without reading his bio, which she intended not to do. She wanted a boyfriend, not a boy toy. But that smile, those dimples, the perfectly messy hair, the shadow of a beard she imagined would send chills down her spine when they kissed, enough to drive her wild. Reading his bio, Charlotte found herself instantly lost in an imaginary future with him. The Spanish colonial home, yoga in the garden, her marketing businesses thriving, his groundbreaking medical research changing the course of cosmetic surgery, tapas on the veranda, summers in London, visiting his family. Alex sat at a table in direct eyesight of the entrance. A perfect man at a perfect table, far enough from the entrance to escape the heat, but well within the afternoon glow, bathing his skin in gold, and within clear view of her favorite barista, Naomi. Naomi always anticipated Charlotte's every need and filled it before Charlotte noticed what she lacked. Charlotte strutted directly towards Alex, the light forming a halo around her flawless silhouette. She smiled and waved to Naomi, whose facial rings shimmered in the sun. Alex stood to greet her, dressed exactly as she imagined he would. Beige linen pants, vertically striped cotton shirt with a deep V-neck, and pristinely clean brown leather sneakers. He smiled. "Wow," he said. "You're even more gorgeous in person." His British accent, the icing on the perfectly constructed cake in front of her. "You are looking quite good yourself," she responded. Alex leaned in for a friendly kiss on the cheek. Charlotte stepped back, placing a hand between their faces. "I'm still getting over this," she grimaced, pointing in the general direction of her face. "Gotta love those summer colds." "I understand." Please, sit," he invited as he pulled out her chair. Charlotte sat and smoothed the skirt of her silk mini dress. "What can I get for you? I'll place the order for us. I'll take a chamomile tea with honey and lemon, please." "Right." Alex stood at the counter between two glass cases of freshly baked muffins, scones, cookies, and tarts. A large basket of fresh fruit in front of the register. Charlotte watched him place their order. Her chamomile tea and his tall, black Americano. He was very polite to Naomi, charming, almost flirtatious. He tapped his phone on the card reader to complete the transaction. He turned to meet Charlotte at the table, but changed his mind. "Actually, can I purchase one of those peaches? They look delectable. From a local orchard. Perfect time of year," Naomi answered. Alex peeked around the basket and selected one. "How much?" he asked. Naomi smiled. "On the house?" Alex looked at Charlotte, then back at Naomi, confused. "You're a friend of Charlotte's. She keeps us all employed." Naomi winked at Charlotte, who returned the playful look. The cafe's owner, Tracy, approached Naomi then. "See you in the morning, kid. I'm heading home." She slung her computer bag over her shoulder, exposing a bandaged pinky. "Cat scratch you again?" Naomi joked. "Damn plastic wrap. Sliced it right open." Naomi nodded. "Call if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll meet you here, bright and early," Tracy said sarcastically. "You know you can just give me a set of keys, and you can sleep sometimes," Naomi called to Tracy on her way out. Tracy smiled and winked. "Keep up the good work, kid. You'll get there." Tracy disappeared into the sunlight, back at their table now. Alex joked, "I didn't know I was with a local celebrity. Shall I pick up the drinks when they're ready? Naomi will bring them right to us." "Brilliant. So, Charlotte, we meet at last." He placed his peach on the small plate Naomi gave to him and unwrapped his silverware roll. Naomi appeared with their hot drinks, your tea with honey and lemon, and your Americano, black, she recited as she gently placed the hot mugs in front of them. "Thank you, Naomi," Charlotte said, as the barista walked back around the counter. "Yes, we meet at last." She squeezed lemon juice into her tea and stirred in some honey. "Cheers!" Alex held up his mug. Cheers, Charlotte mirrored. I thought you Brits drank tea over there. Well, when in America, as they say. Alex sipped his coffee. So, tell me more about your first few days at the hospital. Not the onboarding stuff, or the people, but the work. The meat and potatoes, as we say. Charlotte rested her elbows on the table and cradled her chin. She was all his, right? I mean, where to start? I am just gobsmacked. Alex's face lit up. The operating theater they built is suited for the Queen. Top surgeons will fly in on a weekly basis for my lecture. From there, training. Who would have thought my research would have the reach it has? And cosmetic surgery is growing more and more by the day due to increasing accessibility. Now just imagine. I mean, costs will be reduced considerably. As Alex went on with his research, Charlotte drifted off into daydreams. She wasn't interested in his work. She was interested in his paycheck, his face, and his body. She nodded and smiled, raised her eyebrows from time to time, inserted an interested "oh" occasionally. As he talked, she devised a plan to hook him for good. Before he knew what hit him, he would be her husband, stepfather to her son. She entertained his dissertation about facial symmetry and flesh, even as Naomi visited to see if they needed anything. Alex's eyes were locked on Charlotte's, so animated, eyes wide, arms gesturing this way and that. Charlotte gave Naomi an apologetic look and motioned that they were fine. Naomi turned to walk away and stopped dead in her tracks when she heard Alex describe human flesh with the same excited tone he used to describe the peaches. She glanced back at Alex, whose back was to her. Charlotte clocked Naomi's troubled look, but with a reassuring nod and smile, Naomi went back to taking orders. Would you like to see it sometime? Charlotte heard Alex say. Caught off guard with a question, she asked, See what? Surgery? Oh, no. No. The mock theater I built, where I practice at home, he answered. Oh, she hesitated. Sure. I think I could come by one day. She bought herself some time. What about today? Now? My place is just around the corner. What do you say? Well, I still have this cold. One outing in a day is probably all I have energy for, she said nervously. Anyhow, I can probably demonstrate on this peach, now that I think of it. Do you have a pen? Charlotte dug into her Gucci bag and located a pen. Before handing it to Alex, she discreetly took her phone out of the bag and placed it on her lap. Here you go, she said, as she steadied her hand. He took the pen without looking at her. Alex drew 2 lines on the peach. Like I was explaining, if the cheekbone is here, he pointed at a line. You want to make your incision precisely. He took up the butter knife and carefully placed it along the second line. Here. He punctured the skin, juice escaping the fruit, dripping down the peach. He smiled and applied more pressure, exposing the meat inside. Veiny, juicy, fleshy. "Yeah," Alex said, smiling. "Yeah," he said again, almost laughing. Charlotte looked for Naomi at the counter. She was distracted by a line of customers, unaware of the peach mutilation. "What do you practice on?" At home?" she asked Alex. "Pigs, mostly. Dead. Donated to science," he answered as he used his napkin to wipe the liquid evidence off his hands. "Pigs, mostly. So, pigs and you know there is just no comparison to the beautiful, fatty flesh of a live human." Alex's eyes were wild, glued to Charlotte's. I have the nanny at home. I really should be going," she mumbled as she gathered her bag and started to stand. "Just let me show you this last thing, right? Then you'll go and get some rest?" He retrieved his phone from his pocket, looked at the screen to unlock it, and opened an app. He swiped a few times and turned the phone so that the screen faced her, still half standing. The image of her son playing in the park with the nanny glared back at her. She gasped and put a hand to her mouth. "Sit," Alex demanded quietly. Charlotte looked at Naomi again, still taking orders. She sunk into her seat. "Naomi can't help you, Charlotte." Without turning his phone around, he swiped through his photos. Picture after picture of the boy. At least a dozen. At school, in the back of her car, at home through windows, with her parents at the plantation home. Tears welled, and she used every ounce of strength to keep them from falling. "You are going to suck those tears down, and you are going to come with me. We leave together as a happy couple. One wrong move, and the boy is dead." He locked his phone and put it back in his pocket. He cleared his throat and stood. "Right then, shall we?" he said, smiling, his voice bouncy and pleasant. He held out a hand to Charlotte. She took it and stood. They walked out of the cafe hand in hand into the setting sun. The next morning, Naomi arrived at the cafe shortly after 5. Without keys, she'd be stuck outside waiting on Tracy, so she never arrived on time. After letting herself in, she stuffed her backpack in the cubby below the register. She clocked in, pulled her phone from her back pocket, found the playlist she wanted, and plugged it into the cafe's sound system. This was Naomi's way of letting Tracy know she had arrived without having to speak so early in the morning. The cafe's landline was blinking. Great. Another warning about our car insurance, Naomi thought, as she picked up the phone to listen to the message. "Hello. I know this might sound strange, but my friend was there yesterday to meet a date, and now I can't get in touch with her. We talk every day, especially after a date. Her name is Charlotte. She's tall, blonde, beautiful. She was meeting a guy named Alex, a doctor from London. She texted me right after 4 to tell me she was there. I don't know how long they stayed. Anyway, if anyone knows anything, can you please give me a call? I have to wait 24 hours to report her missing. It's just not like her. My name is Jen, by the way. Jen said her number before Naomi had a pen and something to write on. So she started the message over. At the end of the second listen, Naomi wrote down the number on a napkin and placed it under her phone. She wasn't calling anyone at that hour. Besides, Naomi sort of knew Charlotte. She wouldn't be surprised if she left with the weirdo and was still naked in his bed, sleeping off another drunk. Naomi continued with her morning routine. She opened the bin of Colombian breakfast blend beans. She grabbed the large scooper and looked down at the beans. She screamed and dropped the scooper. "Tracy," she pleaded. "Tracy, come out here." No answer. No sound. She pulled her phone off the cord, music still playing through her phone's speaker, and dialed 911 without pressing send. She looked around and tiptoed back to the coffee bin to confirm her nightmare. 2 pinky fingers, lifeless on a pile of beans, one with a perfectly manicured pink nail, one with a band-aid wrapped around the knuckle. "Oh, God," she cried. She noticed a piece of paper sticking out from the manicured pinky. At closer look, the paper had writing on it. A note. With a trembling hand, Naomi reached into the bin, carefully maneuvering around the fingers. She grabbed a corner and quickly yanked the note out, shrieking, "Squeal, and you're next." She slid to the floor in hopeless panic. Note clutched in one hand, her phone clutched in the other. The Beatles' "I Want to Hold Your Hand" played softly from her phone. For such a time as this, once a week, for the past 10 weeks, Hattie had come to the local cafe for Bible study with a few of her friends from church. It was led by Marissa, one of the long-standing members of the church. Once a week, for the past 10 weeks, Hattie had left the cafe feeling uplifted, inspired, and closer to her Creator. And this week, the 11th week, she expected no different. Uplifting music wafted through the speakers, mixing with the sounds of dishes clanking and milk frothing behind the counter. The familiar noise was music to Hattie's ears as she entered the coffee shop. "Hattie!" Carmen squealed, beckoning Hattie over from the door. "Coffee's on me today. I got you your usual." Hattie smiled. Carmen was the personification of generosity, although that wasn't always the case. "How are you doing?" she asked, sliding into the booth that they always sat at. "Better than I deserve," Harper quoted, appearing behind them. It's what Carmen always said when asked that question. It's the truth. God is so good. As long as I'm breathing, it's more than I deserve. She shrugged. Harper slid into the booth next to Hattie, smiling. "Is Marissa late for the first time ever?" Hattie asked, looking around. "I thought I saw her car outside." In response, Marissa came out of the bathroom and joined the 3 college girls at their booth. "Good morning, girls," she said, eyes bright, as she took her seat next to Carmen. The 4 girls took each other's hands, and Marissa opened them in prayer before they opened their Bibles and began reading and discussing the book of Esther. Is it wrong to be so engrossed in divine wisdom that you lose track of what's happening around you? Surely not, although it can be dangerous. What is wrong is to come into a quiet, privately owned cafe at 11:38 a.m., lock the doors, aim a gun at the ceiling, and set it off. Which is exactly what happened next. The shot rang out in the near silence of the cafe, piercing through the air like only a bullet can, sending a singing bell into the ears of all who were near it. A young child across the shop screamed and was instantly grabbed by his mother, who hid under a table with her back to the aisle, blocking anyone from getting her child. A barista dropped a porcelain cup out of shock, and it shattered on the floor, spilling hot liquid everywhere. Hattie cupped her hands over her mouth so as to not scream. "Everybody hold up your phones," the man shouted, swinging his gun around. "Hold them up high." It took no time at all for everyone to comply. "Good. Now you." He pointed his gun at the man who was standing at the counter. "Go and get them. Bring all the phones to me." The barista couldn't have been more than 17, and his hands shook as he went around to each table and collected the phones. That 17-year-old boy wasn't religious, but at that moment, he was praying. Praying that somebody, anybody, had called the police. "It'll be okay, girls," Marissa whispered. Hattie could tell that she was trying to be strong, but she could also see the fear in her eyes when she glanced at the man with the gun. "You 4. The man pointed his gun in the direction of Hattie and her friends, and it was at that point that Harper began to cry. "In front of the door. Stand." None of them knew what he meant, but he motioned for them to get up. And since he had a gun, they did what he asked. Then he did it again to the next table, making them stand in front of the windows. Soon, the whole store was stood in front of the glass entrance to the small cafe, including the little boy and his mother. While he was lining them up, the sound of sirens began, getting louder and louder, closer and closer, until they were too loud for Hattie to bear, and she covered her ears. Henry Walker, an amplified and slightly muffled voice, said from outside, "This is the New York City Police Department. We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Of course, Henry did no such thing, but waved his gun in the air, almost as if he was saying, "Don't try me." Next to Hattie, Carmen was holding her necklace so tightly that her knuckles were turning white, while her other hand was entwined with Harper's. Marissa's lips were moving, but there was no sound coming out. She was praying. Not a bad idea, Hattie thought. So she joined in. She closed her eyes and began to pray. As she did, words from the passages that the four girls had been going through came to mind. It was a popular verse, seen on stickers and coffee mugs, for such a time as this. Of course, the full verse was a bit more convicting, but that's the part that rang through Hattie's young mind as the minutes turned into hours. There was a clock on the wall behind the shop counter, and it served as a reminder of just how long these people had been standing here. 2:30, 3 hours, and the police had done nothing. Why aren't they just coming in? Someone asked to Hattie's left. We're blocking the door. They no doubt have a sniper on the roof, waiting to take the shot. But they can't because they might hit one of us. She responded, her voice low. It had been too long standing here. She didn't want to do this, but she had put it off long enough. She took a deep breath, in and out. It always brought her peace, ever since she read that the name Yahweh was originally written without any vowels, and that in every breath you could hear it being said. Once she took a deep breath, she stepped forward, just a little bit. What are you doing? The guy with the gun asked, aiming his weapon at her chest. Get back in line. You don't look so good, Hattie said, her voice shaking ever so slightly. Can I get you a cup of water? Henry stared at her as he considered this, evaluating, calculating, risk assessing. Hattie was doing the same, taking in the blood soaking into the side of his shirt, the sweat dripping down his face, and the wideness of his eyes. What's your name? Henry narrowed his eyes at her. Hadassah. People call me Hattie. No one called the girl by her real name these days, but she told him anyways. I just thought that you might feel better if you had a cup of water. Sorry. Hadassah. Yes, I think a cup of water would help me feel better. Thank you. Can you get one for me? Hattie nodded, the weight of her decision settling in. No longer was she glanced over as just another piece of a horde, but now she had been called out. She was in this. It took all of her strength to take the next few steps. All of them brought her closer to a dangerous man who seemingly did not care about her safety. But there was still a little inkling in the back of her mind, a blossom of hope that slowly bloomed as she poured some water from the tap into a plastic cup and brought it to him. That maybe, just maybe, this would all go to plan. Hope that they would all make it out of this alive. Henry, still suspicious, took the cup from Hattie, but said nothing. She looked back toward the front window, at all the other customers who were looking at her like a madman. Everyone watched with a sort of anticipation as he drank the entire cup greedily. I need more, please, Hadassah. He handed the cup back to Hattie, and she filled it again, and then gave it back. Once he had drunk his fill, he sent Hattie back to the front of the shop. 45 minutes passed. This time, Hattie's voice shook even more when she stepped forward and said, "Excuse me, what is it, Hadassah?" Henry asked. But he didn't point the gun at her. "I'm really very sorry to interrupt you like this, but I couldn't help but notice that you're bleeding. I'm training to be an EMT. I could patch you up, if you'd like." Now, if it had been almost any other person in the cafe who asked this, they would have been turned down. But Hattie had somehow managed to find favor in the eyes of this man, and therefore he nodded, beckoning her forward for the second time. "The first aid kit is behind the counter," Hattie said, pointing. He allowed her to go and get it, and when she had, the two of them sat down at one of the tables and got to work, while Hattie cut his shirt open so she could clean the wound and examine it. Henry kept his gun trained on the front of the store so that no one would try to escape while he was inconvenienced. "You've been kind to me, Hadassah." "Why?" Henry asked. Hattie pushed her glasses up with the back of her wrist. "I don't think that you're a very bad person. I think that sometimes people get mixed up in bad things. Things that grab a hold of them and try to drag them down into the depths of darkness. Sometimes, when something's got a hold of someone, they can't get out on their own. Sometimes, we need to lend a hand to those who are wrestling with evil." "And what if I really am a bad person?" Henry responded. "Well, then, that would make all of us. But there's a difference between a bad person and a bad person who's trying to be better." Hattie threaded some string on a surgical needle. "And if you'll allow me, I'd like to help you with that. I want to be the hand that gives you what you need to win this fight with darkness." It was truly a miracle that she had said all that without tripping on her words or messing up with her stitches. She tied the string off and cut it, then lowered Henry's shirt back down. The injury wasn't what she had been expecting. Honestly, she thought he might have been shot, but it was still a deep scrape that needed patched up. "And how would you do that?" Henry asked, taking her wrist. When he looked at her, Hattie noticed that his eyes were different than they had been. They were searching instead of wandering, passionate instead of crazed. "Help me, I mean." "Well, it could start by the two of us sitting down and having a very serious conversation about what it means to be good or evil and how we can change at all. And then, depending on what you decide, it would probably end with you getting in one of those cop cars and atoning for what you've done up to this point." Henry nodded, and Hattie sat with him, silently asking for wisdom on what she should say. With a steadying breath, she decided to start by explaining the gospel to him, starting at the beginning, like she had been taught to do. She explained how God made the world, made us perfect, but then how we fell into sin. She explained separation from God and what that meant for us in our fallen state. And then she told Henry, who was listening intently, as though this was the only thing he ever had to think about. "Henry, why are we here today? What made you decide to do this?" Hattie asked when she had gone through her spiel. "I got in with some rough people. We did something bad," he said, head in his hands. "Police pulled up, and I didn't want to get caught, so I ran. Figured I could do what they do in the movies and negotiate my escape. Wasn't till I got in here that I remembered." Henry looked up at Hattie, eyes shining with tears. "Bad guy never gets out of the situation in the movies." "Okay," Hattie nodded. "So what's next?" "Everyone goes home," Henry whispered, taking in a shaky breath. "And I go to prison." Hattie stood and turned to the rest of the people in the cafe, and Henry put the gun on the table, away from him. "Go home," Hattie told everyone along the window, smiling. Then she sat back down and faced the criminal before her, asked him how he was feeling, listened intentionally only to him while a SWAT team came in and surrounded them both. Henry had long since broken down into tears and was shaking with sobs so hard that he couldn't even hold his hands up in surrender. He didn't protest when they put the cuffs on him and read him his rights, or when he got it in the back of a police car. When it was all over, Hattie put her head down in her arms on the table. She did not anticipate how exhausting it would be to evangelize at gunpoint. Her friends came back in and laid a blanket over her, matching the ones wrapped around them. Shock blankets, they were called. "Hattie, that was so stupid and brave," Carmen said, sitting next to her. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, just doing what had to be done," Hattie responded, looking up from the table to her friends. "We should go get ice cream," Harper said, then quickly amended, "through the drive-through." Hattie snorted, laughing. "I have ice cream in my dorm room. Come on." The four girls left the cafe and drove to the college, each separately praying a little prayer of gratitude on the drive over, and then finished their Bible study in the comfort of Hattie's living room, with bowls of chocolate ice cream next to them. When Henry's trial came 2 weeks later, Hattie attended. She watched him plead guilty and apologize to the people he had hurt. She didn't visit him in prison, but wrote him letters of encouragement every once in a while. When he wrote back that he had become a Christian, she shared it with everyone in her church. Overjoyed, after a year or so, the four girls decided to try the coffee shop again. And so now, every week for the past 10 weeks, Hattie, along with a new friend named Maya, has gone to the little family-owned cafe for a Bible study with a few of her friends from church. She'd walk in and hear the quiet, uplifting music and the gentle bustle of the few people inside, and smell the fresh, ground coffee beans and vanilla. Then Maya and Hattie would see Carmen, who had dyed her blonde hair bright orange since last week, and Harper with her new engagement ring, and Marissa, who was now pregnant. And they'd sit and talk and read and pray, just as they expected to do for the next 10 weeks. A bitter choice. The first thing he could recognize was an old, musty, wet scent. He's groggy, his mouth is dry, and his head hurts, but he feels warmth on his face. With that, he hears a crackling fire. Attempting to lift his hand to his face, he realizes his hands are tied. His feet are tied. He opens his eyes and can see that he is tied to a chair. His eyes get used to the fire's dim light, and he is seated in an old, dusty room with wooden beams at a small round table with a teapot and teacup in the middle. He smells the scent of steeping tea. He starts to feel panic and realizes that he is well and indeed tied to the chair, and he's not getting out. His mind races like anyone's would in this predicament. Who did this? Why me? Why am I here? His usual defensive bravado kicks in, but he quickly realizes there's no one here to impress, to convince, or so he initially thought. Swiveling his head, looking around for anything to help him escape, a way out, or a clue as to where he is, he yelps when he sees her. There, by the fire, a young woman stands. She is tall, curvier than he prefers, and simply dressed. She doesn't make a single sound. She seems calm as she continues looking into the flames while holding her cup of tea and quietly sipping. Who the hell is she? At first, he thinks this is a first date gone wrong, but then he sees her face, and he recognizes her. I know her, but his head is so foggy. Did she drug me? He can't place her face. He feels the first beads of sweat dripping down his face as he tries to look around for someone else to help, or something to lean against to free himself. Looking around and listening, he confirms they are the only two here. Where the hell am I? Is this a cottage? In New York City? After spending precious moments trying to make sense of this, he shakes it off and starts to take in more of the space, thinking of creative ways to get himself free. If I can just get free, she's just one woman. He thinks to himself, I've managed worse. She doesn't acknowledge his panic. She slowly looks at the fire and sips her tea. If she's this calm, she has a plan. He could handle emotions, tears, and outbursts, but calm women never spelled a good time to him. Noticing him finally, the woman looks over at him, and it barely registers on her face that he is awake. She takes another sip of tea and moves to the table, taking the other seat across from him. She looks down at her hands and places them on the table. Only then does he see her entire face when she looks him in the eye. He is immediately filled with fear. "Fuck," he says, and stills in, struggling with his restraints. She smiles lightly at his remark. "I knew you to be more eloquent than that," waving it off. "But again, I did catch you off guard." Catching himself, he prepares to put on a show. "Ellie, what's going on? What happened? How are we here? How are you here? I thought you had left the country. I've been so worried about you. I tried to write a call or text, but I didn't have your information. You have no idea how worried I've been after everything you've gone through, what we've gone through." She said nothing and continued staring at him with the calm, blank stare she'd had when she first sat down. "Look, honey, what happened was horrible. So many terrible losses and accidents. When your brother..." He paused when he heard her quick inhale. Her head whipped to the side like she had been slapped. And when she looked back at him, he saw fury in her eyes. "If this is about the money, I can pay you. But you have no right to do this. To what? Kidnap me? Drug me? What else are you going to do? You don't have the guts to do any real damage. What do you think is going to happen? Let's talk this out, like calm adults. You're making a mountain from a molehill. Nothing that happened was my fault." He was about to dig into his routine defense that he'd done during police questioning and lawyers listening. But she held up a hand. "Martin, it's not about money. It never was for our family. Though I know that's all you understand. So this may be a tough concept. It's about the truth." She stands slowly, gracefully grabbing the teacup and placing it before him, pausing to take a look at him. The first proper look she's taken of him in 5 years since everything happened. You'd think with all that money, you'd have taken better care of yourself. She moves the tea kettle closer to the cup and settles back in her chair. "I was surprised how big you've gotten. I'm grateful I got the extra rope. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so snug and cozy on that chair," she said, sitting back and putting her hands in her lap. Martin looks at the teacup. It's empty. Then he looks at the tea kettle. He can see steam rising from the spout and smell tea. He looks back at her and sees that she has a calm, serene smile. "What the fuck do you want, Ellie?" he says, defeated, realizing he will have to play whatever game she has set up and outsmart her, like he does with everyone. "I've made you a soothing tea, but I want to tell you a story first," she says. And he sees a brief shadow of darkness across her face. Was it a shadow? Or is it her anger? Either way, it can't be good. She takes a deep breath and begins her tale. There was a family, a happy and loving family. They weren't perfect. No one was, but they were happy. A mother, a father, a daughter, and a younger brother. They had been building a nice estate as a family, since her brother was back from college, and their daughter was running their company business. Combined, their wealth was not something to write to the Times about, but it afforded them a lifestyle and attention. They were comfortable, happy, giving much back to their community, and always the first people to help those in need. Reaching back for her own tea, she sipped. Then a man introduced himself. The man saw that their kindness and eagerness to help were things to be preyed upon and taken advantage of. "That's where you come in, Martin," she said, leaning her elbows on the table and putting her head in her hands. He could tell she was comfortable, so he listened, waiting for his time to strike. This charming, crass, but witty man came to this family with an opportunity to do so much good. "You did your homework there, didn't you, Marty?" Knowing my father had been dying to help those less fortunate in other parts of the world, but didn't have the gift or health to travel like he'd like. "So you offered your assistance," she continued. "Look, your father was an adult and made a decision he shouldn't have. It's not my fault he was as gullible as he was fragile in health." Martin interjected, but it didn't move or ruffle her as he hoped. Again, he could deal with outbursts and emotions, but that calm quiet unnerved him. "My father trusted you. He gave you a sum of money the first time. I don't want to know how you substantiated the positive works the money did for those families," she said, leaning back and drumming her fingers on the table. "AI has come a long way these days. It's not my fault he couldn't see the flaws." He tried to add that charm, but failed because he kept looking back at the tea. "Is it poisoned? Is she going to kill me with the teapot? Seems a bit violent for her," he thought. But he'd been surprised by her already. She scoffed at his remark. "You continued to take his money and show these manufactured images and proof of goodwill for 2 years, until he gave you access to our funds without knowing you had cheated him. You promptly drained those funds, millions of dollars, and disappeared, funneling the money to an untraceable account. No court would mandate a warrant or search for you. Again, sweetie, it's not my fault your father was an idiot, and you could have stopped him," he said, thinking the sweat from his palms could help loosen the rope around his wrists. She went on. "The stress of this loss and the bureaucratic failing that is our justice system caused my already fragile father to suffer a heart attack and die, leaving my mother a husk of a woman. I had to step away from the business and take care of her. My brother took over the company. You had thoroughly gutted those funds to barely enough to keep the lights on. The debt drowned my brother and his sanity, and he took his own life. The loss of both men caused my mother to stop living. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't sleep. She just wept. until one day, she just stopped breathing. The doctors say it was a brain aneurysm. It was heartache, she says with tremendous confidence. She gets up and goes to the fire. He sees her shaking. Is it from the cold or from anger? He continues his slow struggle to free his hand from the ropes, but knows it won't do any good. He just has to wait and see how this plays out. Look, Ellie, I'm sorry this all happened to you. I really did send some money to those charities. He had to, he thought. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to get their government-valid invoice for his tax write-offs, which he forged. And everything that happened to your family, you can't blame those freak incidents on me. It just doesn't make sense. And you've always been a sensible woman. Let's just talk like adults, and we can find the reason behind all this. He began preparing more excuses, but he saw that she didn't even react. She took a slow breath while staring into the fire. You ruined us for nothing but greed. He didn't know what to say, so she turned and stared at him. For greed, she whispered. Taking her time, she returned to the table and picked up the teapot. Keeping eye contact with him, she poured the tea into the cup. She placed the teapot back down on the table. Stepping behind him, she stills. In that pregnant pause of silence, horrifying scenarios rush into his mind. Is she going to smash my face against the table? Was it a ploy? Is she going to slit my throat or strangle me? He hears her take a deep breath, unties one of his hands, and slowly takes her seat across from him. Unafraid of what he might do with one hand free. The tea is yours, Martin. A gift from me, she says, leaning back in the chair. He looked at the cup. The dark liquid smelled rich and fragrant. Was it poisoned? Maybe. Maybe not. If she wanted to kill him, wouldn't she have done it already? Why wait so long? Why all the dramatics? Was she testing his conscience? Joke's on her. He doesn't think he has one. A twisted act of mercy. Instead of a violent death, he would likely have had from the latest con. He'd definitely turned on the wrong family. That was not his best work. He'd been getting sloppy. So what? He drinks it? If he refuses, will she force him? He stares at the cup. As I said before, this is about trust. It's about faith in kindness, in my kindness. Do you have that faith, Martin? Pausing, she watches his internal struggle. Take a drink, Martin, she says, leaning forward. He could throw it in her face as a distraction, but it's not hot enough to do any damage, and he still would be stuck in this chair. It wouldn't distract her enough to manage an escape. And if I don't? He asks quietly. She cocked her head to the side and knowingly smiled, confirming that if he didn't, she'd force it. With a deep breath, and trembling hand, he lifts the cup to his lips and drinks. He watches her face as the warm, bitter tea slides down his throat. He stares at her as he waits to feel anything. His heart pounds. Is this it? Or is it nerves? What else will I start feeling? Throat burning, organ failure. Ellie watches him in silence. Her expression is unreadable. 1 minute passes, then another, and another. He feels no pain. Was there even any poison? Was it just tea? He laughs nervously with relief. He can feel sweat dripping from his face. That's it? That was your big revenge? Making me squirm and sweat? Sneering at her. I knew you didn't have it in you. Weak, just like your whole family. Ellie smiles and leans closer, whispering, "Who said the poison works fast?" Martin's smug smile falters. He looks at the cup, the back at Ellie's serene face. What do you mean? He blurts out between panicked breaths. She stands and picks up her coat, and he sees her demeanor change to light and easy. Some things take time, Marty. She pauses and smiles at him. It could be days. It could be weeks. It could be in your sleep. It could be during your favorite meal. And it causes a devastating reaction. It could be tomorrow in a crowded room. You'll just have to wait and see and hope. She tosses a kid's Swiss Army knife on the table and walks out. He stares at the closed door in horror. He's alive for now. But for how long? The fear will never leave him. With every meal, every sip, every breath, he will wonder if it will his last.